مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. العالم مليء بالمفاجآت، ولو سألتم معظم الخبراء قبل عام فالقليل منهم سيتوقع أننا سنكون الآن في الشهر التاسع من الحرب بين روسيا وأوكرانيا، وأن الأوكرانيين ينتصرون. القليل منهم سيتوقع أننا سنكون في الشهر الثالث من ثورة شعبية تحصل في كل أنحاء إيران يقودها نساء غاضبات. القليل منهم سيتوقع أن يحتفل جو بايدن والحزب الديمقراطي بالفعل بنجاحهما بعد الانتخابات التشريعية. القليل منهم سيتوقع أن إسرائيل على وشك أن يقودها مرة أخرى رئيس وزراء تم انتخابه لأول مرة لهذا المنصب قبل 26 عاما. القليل منهم سيتوقع فوز فريق كرة القدم السعودي على أرجنتينا في بطولة كأس العالم. للدراسة هذه المفاجآت وغيرها والتقييم تأثيرها على السياسة الخارجية الأمريكية مع الاقتراب من نهاية عام 2022، يسعدني أن أرحب باثنين من أكثر الخبراء معرفة بما يتعلق بالشؤون الدولية في واشنطن، كينيث كاتسمان ودانيال بلاتكا. Welcome back to داخل Washington. There's 1 month left in 2022. Lots of foreign policy issues on the table. Let's take a look around the globe with my very special guests, Ken Katzman and Danny Pletka. Thank you so much for joining me on this show. So first, big picture. At this moment, America's adversaries seem to be going through a rough period. Russia is losing the war in Ukraine, China facing unprecedented protests, Iran confronting the most serious popular uprising since the Islamic regime came to power. This should all be pretty good news for America. Is it? Danny?
First of all, Rob, it's really a pleasure to be on again. So nice to see both you and Ken. Look, this is a really, really interesting time. And I think you laid out what are a series of important opportunities. Our adversaries really are in disarray. And of course, all of this could be encapsulated by that great moment when the United States beat Iran in the World Cup. So, things are going well. The problem is that I have rarely seen an administration less willing to be engaged on a lot of these issues. They're doing the right thing on Ukraine for sure, but on Iran, it seems like the administration is sitting back a little bit. On China, you can see the president hesitating. Should I cheer on Chinese demonstrators for freedom and risk my relationship? What should I do? How should I handle it? It's really disappointing.
So, Ken, this moment when our adversaries are on the back foot, is this an opportunity for the United States?
Well, it certainly is. And, I guess I'm not quite as optimistic. I mean, I think China is certainly going to be able to settle down these protests. They've got very massive security forces. The Iranians, on the other hand, I'm taking this rebellion very, very seriously. It's gone on a long time. It's nationwide. Security forces are clearly in a dilemma. They don't want to be ordered to just commit mass murder, and they're on a back foot. You're absolutely right, and I think a lot of this, is a consequence of the U.S. success in Ukraine. I mean, I think from 6,000 miles away, U.S. weaponry has basically shown Russia to be completely inept, not a superpower at all. A middling regional power at most. Putin is facing a very clear defeat. He's got mounting unrest inside Russia. I think the Russian people clearly believe that he's made a massive blunder here and he's lost legitimacy. Now, whether he's overthrown is a different issue. But I concur with your overall framing that the United States is looking pretty good now, and I think many countries realize that they may have underestimated the United States and made too much, perhaps, of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan as some sort of a defeat or a loss. And I think the United States is acquitting itself quite well, as I said, in Ukraine right now.
Let's take each of these individually. Let's start with Ukraine, Russia. Danny, the Biden administration and most outside observers never thought the Ukrainians would perform as well as they are doing. What do you think our game plan is from here? I mean, how does this end?
Right. So I'm a little bit less positive about the Biden administration than Ken is, for a whole variety of reasons. First of all, they're doing the right thing, but they're doing it under duress. They're being pressured very substantially by Capitol Hill. Internally, there are disagreements, but the administration is still moving a little bit too slowly. Every day that we don't provide the Ukrainians with what they need to defeat Russia is a day when more Ukrainians die, when there's more damage done. And then there are a whole series of additional next steps that need to be taken. There's going to be massive reconstruction costs when this ends. And it will end at some point. And the reputation of Ukraine is well deserved as a country with an extraordinarily inefficient and corrupt government. And so how we figure out how these reparations are going to end up being administered, whether Russian foreign assets are going to be used, all of those are questions that really need to be worked out. There needs to be a legislative framework for that as well. And the administration has not really started that conversation with Capitol Hill. One other little point, they're really moving quarter by quarter, which is strange. For all of us who plan our household, maybe that's a not bad idea. But when the US government isn't planning beyond January or February of 2023, it becomes difficult for the Pentagon to plan ahead. It becomes difficult for congressional check writers to plan ahead. So there are a lot of complications ahead. I wish I felt like this administration was riding the horse rather than kind of following behind it, desperately grabbing onto the reins.
So, Ken, do you think that we and the Ukrainians see how this ends in the same way? How do American national security experts see how this conflict comes to a close?
Well, I think that's a debate that's raging right now. I mean, I think, some in the administration, outside the administration, feel that, it's time to maybe push the Ukrainians to accept some sort of a compromise, maybe, something back at, the pre-February ceasefire line, some sort of ceasefire along the February lines before the invasion. Others, want to press the advantage, feel that Russia has been shown to be a hollow military. It's got an army that realizes this was a mistake, doesn't want to be there, and the thing to do is to press them till they're defeated. I'm sort of in the same camp, I guess, with Danny. If it were up to me, I'd probably give them F-16s. If it were up to me, I'd give them Apache helicopters. But it's not up to me. But I think the end game is starting. There's a debate over the end game. I think I'll leave it there.
And are you, either of you, more worried today than you were earlier about the possibility that Vladimir Putin rolls the dice and uses, either expands the conflict to include NATO, or goes up the escalation ladder and uses either chemical, biological, or perhaps even nuclear weapons to forestall an impending defeat?
I'm not worried about that. Actually, I think that that the fact that Ukraine has managed to prove to the Russians just how pathetic their military is means that efforts to expand the conflict and give NATO a casus belli are probably pretty low risk. And part two of that is that I think that on the tactical nuclear side, where you saw President Putin making threats, you then saw him very quickly walking away. And there's a reality there, which is if you want to use tactical nukes, you are going to have to bear the consequence, not simply of the norm breaking, which I think President Putin is fine with, but with the fact that you are irradiating your troops, that you are irradiating territory you hope to occupy, and you are creating a radiation cloud that, because of the prevailing winds, is likely to blow into, I don't know, Russia. So altogether, while it sounds very scary to wave your arms around and say, I'm going to do it, I think the practicalities have actually been forced upon Putin.
And Ken, so you ultimately think Putin is just going to accept a massive and embarrassing defeat?
Well, I don't think he really has a choice. I mean, you asked about expanding the conflict. I mean, to some extent, it's already expanding and going to expand further. Putin's been striking the electricity grid, power grid, and I think inevitably Ukraine is going to start making more strikes into Russia itself. I think that's inevitable as a retaliatory step to try to get Putin to stop attacking the electricity grid. I can see that happening. There's already been attacks on Belgorod, which is over the border. There's other little cities over the border. I think that's inevitable. And Iran, obviously we're all very seized of Iran. I know Iran is basically and somewhat surprising because the Supreme Leader Khamenei is as brutal as he is, and as much as the United States disagrees with him, he's always been fairly clever about calculating power relationships, and to cast his lot in with Putin this way as he has, even to the extent of maybe allowing Russia to build the Iranian drones inside Russia, was reported last week, to ally himself with Russia to this extent, with Russia losing, is quite, it's counterintuitive because Khamenei usually calculates power relationships and doesn't, roll the dice the way he is with Russia, and considering the way Russia is losing right now.
All right. When we come back after the break, we're going to pursue more about Iran, which, as Ken Katzman just said, for the first time in memory, is now an active combatant in a European war. What does that mean for American efforts to stop the nuclear problem and perhaps assist the revolutionaries fighting for freedom in that tyrannical regime? In just a moment. Washington just marked the second anniversary of the Abraham Accords, a Trump-era achievement that included normalization agreements between Israel and Arab states from the Atlantic to the Gulf. Timed to coincide with this landmark event, no fewer than 4 books have appeared by former senior officials of the Trump administration, each of which offers a unique perspective on Trump Middle East policy through the eyes of a key player in that effort. If you're a Trump fan, this is nirvana. If you're a Trump critic, you will roll your eyes at some of the over-the-top self-congratulations. Either way, these 4 books are essential reading to understanding the thinking of intimate advisors to the president, as well as the backstory to events that played out on the front pages of newspapers during that tumultuous administration. These 4 books are Breaking History, a White House memoir by Trump's son-in-law and jack-of-all-trades negotiator on everything from sentencing reform to immigration to Middle East peace, Jared Kushner. Second, In the Path of Abraham, how Donald Trump made peace in the Middle East and how to stop Joe Biden from unmaking it, by Jason Greenblatt, the quiet White House negotiator who did lots of the legwork on the Abraham Accords. Third, Sledgehammer, how breaking with the past brought peace to the Middle East, by David Friedman, Trump's outspoken ambassador to Israel. And fourth, Let My People Know, The Incredible Story of Middle East Peace and What Lies Ahead by Aryeh Lightstone, advisor to that same ambassador, David Friedman. It takes a stiff drink, or perhaps several, to read all these books, but they each tell the story from a unique vantage point. To understand Trump Middle East policy, and especially his unsuccessful Israeli-Palestinian peace plan and his ultimately successful regional peace effort, you have to read them all. Again, my guests today include Danielle Pletka. Danny is a senior fellow in foreign and defense policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, one of Washington's leading research organizations, and she's an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. In a previous life, and I still remember this, she was a senior professional staff member for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Also joining us is Kenneth Katzman. Ken recently retired from his post as senior analyst on Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Persian Gulf affairs at the Congressional Research Service, the independent agency responsible for conducting analysis for members of the American Congress. For 30 years, his responsibilities included analyzing Middle East developments to assist congressmen in their legislative and oversight responsibilities. All right, Danny, on Iran, President Macron of France just recently characterized the events in Iran not just as protests, but as a revolution. If so, what does it mean, and what should we be doing to assist?
Look, I think Macron is right. I wish that I believe that he and the French and the Europeans were doing as much as they could to support to support the protesters across the country. You know, it's very clear, first of all, that the regime doesn't know what to do. This is a police state. They have surveillance technology. They have facial recognition technology. They have ample prison space. They've murdered people in their cars. They murdered somebody who was honking in support of the U.S. win at the World Cup. Shot him in the head while he was driving his car. These are the kind of things that continue to fuel the protests. The challenge is how do we help? And I think there are a large number of ways we can help. Not all of them need to be publicly advertised. I would love to see us stopping the Chinese from purchasing oil illegally from the Iranian government and subsidizing their military operations. I would love to see us take that money and put it in a strike fund for Iranian oil workers, energy workers, shopkeepers, anybody who needs it, who can get somehow access to that kind of support on the outside. I'd love to see more rhetorical support for this from European countries and from the President of the United States, who keeps telling us how important democracy is, except, you know, in Iran. So those are some of the things. Satellite uplink. You know, we had a lot of talk about Starlink, the Elon Musk-owned satellite internet availability. But of course, we talked more about it than we did. And so the Iranian government was able to preclude its use. All of those kinds of things are things that we should be doing to help to support these people who are fighting for their freedom.
All right. Ken, when you look at Iran, are there things that you think the United States can do? Just one item, still to this date, the institution you were closely associated with, Congress still hasn't approved a resolution in support of these protesters. You'd think this one would be an easy vote to cast. What do you think America should be doing?
Well, you'd think that would be an easy vote, although, you know, not going to necessarily resonate. But, you know, Congress has passed in the past a lot of very, very extensive sanctions bills. There are very extensive sanctions on the Iranian regime. Every sector of the Iranian economy is sanctioned. This is all outlined in a quite famous CRS report that I was doing on Iran sanctions, and I hope will continue, even though I'm not there, but who knows. every sector of the Iranian economy is under sanction now. Now it's true that the United States has sanctioned certain Chinese entities that are trading in Iranian petroleum.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Run out of time. Thank you very much, Ken Katzman, Danny Pletka. Delighted to have you help explain to our viewers where America is and where we may be going on this whole range of very sensitive foreign policy issues. Thanks for joining me on Dakhel Washington. I am writing this essay during halftime of the U.S. match against Iran in the World Cup. We, the Americans, are ahead 1-0. By the time I finish, the game will be over. But before that happens, I wanted to share a few thoughts. Congratulations to the Green Falcons of Saudi Arabia. You opened the games with an unforgettable victory over Messi's Argentina team. Whatever else happens in this competition, you and all Arabs have something to take home, a sense of victory, satisfaction, and pride. Excitement for all the underdogs. Enough with France, Germany, Brazil, and other long-time winners. You have to stand and cheer when a Morocco or Tunisia wins a match against one of the world's best teams. Who wants the Yankees to win another World Series? Who wants the Patriots to win another Super Bowl? Not me. Cheer for the little guy, and you will never be disappointed. Compassion for the players from Iran. You are young men representing a country in the midst of revolution. There's no doubt your hearts are with the fellow young men and women marching, protesting, chanting, and in many cases suffering and dying for the cause of freedom and dignity. And there's no doubt that you're on the receiving end of threats from the tyrannical rulers of your country who will not hesitate to punish you and your families for any lack of enthusiasm for your rulers, let alone any expression of support for the protesters and the revolutionaries. It's a no-win position, and you performed with composure and determination. Great pride in the States United team from the USA. We Americans have a lot to learn about soccer, what the rest of the world calls football, including the fact that a draw can be pretty good, especially when you're playing one of the elite teams in the world, like England. Our team not only taught us more about the game, they taught us how to do it as a team in the ultimate team sport. And that's my final observation. We tend to focus on this show, and in politics in general, on individual personalities, from the current and former president to the Speaker and would-be Speaker of the House, to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And personalities are definitely important. But as the World Cup reminds us, many important things in life are ultimately team sports, politics included. Having an electrifying candidate that inspires voters is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Getting those voters to the polls, which is an all-hands-on-deck effort, is what actually wins elections. So too with soccer. Having a star is great, but having a great team is better. That game is now over. The score is still 1-0. America won. On to the next round. وصلنا إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذ كان لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة، وخاصة حول التأثير المحتمل للتغيير الثوري في إيران، تواصلوا معي رجاءً عبر تويتر على هاشتاغ Inside Washington أو راسلوني مباشرة على @RobSatloff. إلى اللقاء في الأسبوع القادم. حتى ذلك الحين إلى اللقاء.